Good morning, everybody, and congratulations in finding your way through the New York Marathon mess this morning. So happy to see so many of you here. This morning, we are very happy to welcome once again Dr. Sthaneshwar Timalsina, the Nirmal K. and Augustine Mattu Endowed Chair in Classic Indic Humanities at Stony Brook University's College of Arts and Sciences. It's here in New York. He is an esteemed, traditionally consecrated teacher of Shaiva Shakta Hindu Tantra. From 2005 to 2023, Dr. Timalsina served as Professor of Religious Studies and Philosophy at San Diego State University and held teaching positions at the University of California, Santa Barbara and Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. He completed his Ph.D. from Martin Luther University in Halle-Wittenberg, Germany, with a focus on the history of Advaita philosophy. His areas of teaching and research include classic Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain literature and philosophies, with a specific focus on consciousness studies. His first book, Consciousness in Indian Philosophy, is a comparative study of Advaita and Buddhist understandings of the self and consciousness. He also works in the area of Tantric Studies, and his recent publications, Tantric Visual Culture, a Cognitive Approach, and Language of Images, Visualization, and Meaning in Tantras, explore the cognitive and cultural domains of Tantric visualization. In all, he has published over 40 articles, books, book chapters, and review essays on religion, culture, literature, aesthetics, and philosophy. In order to disseminate philosophical knowledge distilled from various Hindu schools of thought, he launched the Vimarsha Foundation in 2019, and since then has continued to offer regular full courses through this forum. He envisions Vimarsha as a global school for learning classical Sanskrit-based philosophical systems and mystical traditions. Today, he will speak to us on a very timely subject, the Divine Mother and her manifestations. We are so happy to be able to welcome you back again, Doctor. Thank you.
Yasyonmesha nimeshabhyam jagataha pralayodayau tam shakti chakra vyava prabhavam shankaram stumaha taha taha disantanam sati sahasana ekka sanghato niya hiya ujjama rupo hoi sibo nama parama satchando. In the very first invitation, I dared invoke Kali, and I found welcomed. And today, I do not need to repeat the same urgency to address the Mother. I would rather like to unravel some of her philosophical and practical domains. But before I do so, it is relevant that I show you a connection and a reason for a serious Vedanta practitioners to entertain in rather archaic forms of tantric mystical practices that have often scared people or enticed for all the wrong reasons. What is Vedanta? Veda means knowledge. Anta means excellence. Anta means ending. Anta means perfection, completion. What is Vedanta? Is when yasmin vijñāte sarvam vijñātam bhavati. Upon knowing that, everything else becomes known. Somebody would say, oh, there is nothing like that, but that is what Vedanta is. The heart of the heart, the knowledge of knowledge, realization of realization, that is called Vedanta. And that Vedanta is handed down to us through the Upanishads. These are the last sections of the Vedic literature. And the very teachings of the Upanishads are simplified in the texts such as the Bhagavad Gita. So, when we are speaking about Vedanta, we are speaking about that ancient wisdom that flows through different streams of the Vedas and gets distilled in the Upanishads and is synthesized, summarized, and offered with different commentaries. Among those commentaries, the most prominent one is that of Shankaracharya. And most people today understand by Vedanta the very teachings of Shankara. Historically, this is not true. Even though, yes, I have focused in my studies the school of Shankara, but fact is the fact that there were many commentators before Shankaracharya and many others after Shankaracharya. Upanishadic tradition does not forbid you to openly think and analyze from the text. There is not one final master to teach. Even today, after the guidings of great saints, we are open to rediscover it. It's like the ocean that is spreading everywhere, but not flowing in any one singular direction. And every time its tides are new. Every time you can discover something new, and the tradition allows you to always encounter the text and open to the truth and allow the truth to speak to you. The truth is constantly unfolding. Veda is also the truth, and there is no finitude in the unfolding of the Veda. Vedas themselves are dynamic. In the commentarial tradition of Shankaracharya, what happened? His contemporary, some will say earlier, some will say later, there was one eminent philosopher equal only to Shankara named Mandana Mishra. He and someone who followed him closely named Vachaspati Mishra made a case that the realization of the Atman integrates upasana or meditation, meaning what we call today sadhana. And there was another stream from among the disciples of Shankara, Padmapada Acharya, and later Prakashatman, and these masters said, there is no actual sadhana required when you are into this direct exposure to the absolute truth. So, whatever sometimes you hear the controversy whether Advaita Vedanta can integrate various forms of sadhana, devotion, puja, worship, yajna, all these debates are 1200-year-old debates. We are only reframing them. When you read the Upanishads, within the Upanishads, there are over 100 different what they call vidya. These vidyas are not simply teaching philosophy. They were synthesizing and subverting the original external rituals, internalizing them, and giving a philosophical layer to otherwise opaque and outdated external Vedic rituals that involve various forms of sacrifices but did not involve deeper reflection. So when we address Shakti, because I have to go to my own topic eventually, what is the connection there? The connection is sadhana. What happened is, if you read the Upanishads, prominently they are about different sadhanas. Even the Bhagavad Gita's 18 chapters claim to be 18 different forms of yoga, which is again practice sadhana. A dominant stream kept thinking along the lines of utilizing some forms of meditation to conform what we learn from the Advaita teachings. Sometimes simply listening to the teachers may not be sufficient. And this whole thing comes from the Shakta domain, a simple statement, Aham Brahmasmi. The Upanishads taught us that I am the Brahman. Aham Brahma Asmi. I am the Absolute. So, but what is this I am? Because most often, when we think of me, we think of the body. I am hurt, and only part of my body is injured. I am hurt because she said something mean to me, my mind basically. So I can refer to the body, to the mind, to my finite ego, and that is where I would like to bring Shakti in the sadhana of Vedanta. That where do we start our sadhana is to rework in this very experience of the I, Aham. What is the first meditation we need then? Is this Aham, meaning I am or I experience, can be as small and finite as limited within the epidermis, or can expand and circumscribe the totality, and I can experience myself as the totality. This totality is the Brahman that is immediately experienced not in the form of this or that, but in the form of me, my own pulsation. Sarvo mamayam vibhava, everything is my very expression. And this is the type of Vedanta that we can find, that we can integrate with Shaktism. And this is not something I can take credit for doing, because the tradition is the witness that we can get all the Vedanta monasteries, and particularly I'm coming to the temple of Ramakrishna, who is an epitome of Shakta practices, with the presence of Mother Kali being equal to Ramakrishna. So there we find an expression of Shakti in the most dynamic form. And that gives us a teleology to dive deeper into the Shakta domains. From the Shakta perspective, what is this I am? This I is constantly unfolding and enfolding totality that is called spanda, a pulsation, a absolute, the Brahman. The only difference from the Kevala Advaita within the Shakta Advaita is this absolute is absolutely, intrinsically, inherently pulsating, dynamic. And what is this pulsation like? This is not a temporal expression from the past to the future or any going in any particular direction from far east to the west. This is a constant opening, a constant opening, blossoming of the intrinsic tropes and going back within its own pristine form, absolutely transcending and immanently experiencing, being the totality and transcending the totality. Simultaneously, there is no temporal succession here. So within that absolute, that very presence, we share Shakti, power, potency, because it has this potential to simultaneously unfold into the manifold and still transcend its manifoldness and experience in the singular form of the Brahman. What allows this Brahman to simultaneously express itself into the manifold and transcend its manifolded nature and experience itself in singularity is Shakti, that we invoke in various names as Kali, Para, Kubjika, and so many other names. This very Shakti expresses itself in the fivefold structure. There is no sequentiality within its expression either. First, it is pure consciousness. This pure consciousness itself is being. The being itself is the being of pure consciousness. So it is not when you hear the word Sat Chit Ananda, it is easy for us to say it is Sat and it is also Chit, yet another attribute, just like I have a car, I have a house and I have a job. It is Sat, it is Chit, it is Ananda. It is not like that. Sat is the Chit, is the Ananda. It is not a successive, it is not a yet another trope, yet another attribute. It is what it is, and this what it is the being, is the pure consciousness, is in itself that bliss. And this Chit, which expresses constantly in endless bliss, is itself endowed with volition, ichha, the will to express itself into you and me and the world and recognize the singularity among you, me, and the world. So this materiality is not counterintuitive to singularity of the Brahman. The materiality and my own limited expression is actually a precondition for the recognition. There are many things that exist in the world in unrecognized form. So if a prince is raised by the huntsmen or some tribal villagers in the forest since he was like 6 months old, when he is 20, he is not going to imagine himself as a prince. This is a conviction that arises and we constitute our own bondage. What we need then, a counter argument, counter reasoning, some ideas that allow us to remove or deconstruct the base identities that are so deep rooted within us that when you hear the word I am the Brahman, it immediately repels, and people go back to their existential crisis. What will happen to me if I am just one with everything else? That immediate self-conservation, self-preservation is a birth, just like for the prince raised by the huntsman, a long and sustained training to be different, to be unique, and to be small, to be infinitesimal, to be dirty, to have pollution in the mind, and to have this ego that allows itself to ride over, and discard the other. This training, then, now we are going to the will to recognize the will within totality to express itself and to recognize its own absolute nature in its primordial form, is only left with two additional tropes of cognition and action, and only in cognition and action that we are different. We express our difference. Materiality is an expression of action, the field of action, and our cognitive realm is based on constitution of difference. All different concepts are built based on difference. We distinguish ideas. That is why one idea of a cup is not the idea of a laptop. So the difference is foundational for externalization, and that rests on cognition and action. This Chit Ananda Icha Jnana Kriya, or absolute consciousness, bliss, volition, cognition and action, these fivefold aspects we have recognized in the form of five Shaktis, five goddesses. So when people go to worship the goddess, we can worship her in two different ways. One is just to recognize a wish-fulfilling tree and offer a fruit, hang a lamp there. We recognize alternatively to what it stands for, and that is when the actual sadhana begins. That is when these sadhana become the means for you to understand, to recognize what the Vedanta is teaching you. And these Shakta sadhanas, therefore, are only to help you recognize. We may have some philosophical differences, but ultimately these are both non-dual teachings. And these non-dual teachings help you to enhance your experience in either of the ways, and why Shakta path could be even more appropriate for the type of life we all are living today. Is we are not living in the cave, in the forest, denying the world. We are still living with wealth and family and everything, and therefore this recognition of Shakti within us and recognition of the world, what is in front of us, recognizing our role in this world, like including the election coming 2 days. So all of these are aspects of us being in the world, rather than saying it's just illusion, it doesn't matter. What Shaktapath is saying is you become part and parcel of it. Intrinsically you are woven, interdependently you are co-constituted, and that is the only difference in approaches. Now, foundational to the Shaktapath, I will drop one name, first name will be Tripura Sundari. Tripura is the central deity of tantric practices from roughly around 11th or 12th centuries, have come to prominence, whether from south, north, either way, and have substantially reflected upon with a lot of philosophical contemplation and many form of manuals for deeper layers of sadhana. Many of them are actually credited to the lineage of Shankaracharya. My own gurus are also from the lineage of Shankaracharya. So it is not the case that the lineage of Shankaracharya have rejected Shakta sadhana. That is quite the contrary. Now, why is this Tripura relevant for the practice of Advaita Vedanta? As I said in this Aham, I am, the path of the Tripura just simply recognize the triadic structure within Aham, A, Ha, and Ma. A referring to Shiva, Ha referring to Shakti, and Ma referring to my individuated state of being, is within this Tripura, the triad, Pura transcending above, beyond this triad of what is divided in the form of the father and mother principle, in the dynamic expression and the basis, the foundation for the expression of this dynamism, that comes in convergence in my singular identity of I am. So this Tripura sadhana becomes a medium, a means for reaffirming the teachings that you can find in the Upanishads. And you can read many, many texts. Particularly, I ask you to read Vidyananda, Amritananda, Shivananda, even my own Guru's Guru, Murkharanya, Vidyaranya. He has written a good amount of reflection upon it. So this deeper contemplation that is asked for in the lineage of Tripura Sundari, then let's address a little bit in that. So this Tripura that has now prominence in southern India and also now becoming the most prominent of the Shakta goddesses, except for the northern part where Kali and mostly Kerala and the north is still the Kali form is prevalent. Many people are led to believe that these are completely different Shaktis or goddesses, and they fail to recognize that they are just interwoven and different aspects of recognizing the same absolute, and that comes due to the lack of training from within the lineage. I come from the Sarvamnaya lineage that teaches us the integration of different agamas or the original teachings in tantras, and that is where we recognize their interconnectedness. This Tripura Sundari or Tripura is visualized in the most, she is Sundari, the beautiful one. She is the most beautiful one out there, and the beauty becomes an expression of divine, and she is Vimarsha Shakti. So what is Vimarsha Shakti? Vimarsha is the reflection that is intrinsic to Prakasha or pure consciousness. Rather than saying pure consciousness as self-luminous, what we are saying is it is self-aware, and that very being aware aspect of consciousness is what constitutes Shakti. This because it is able to be self-aware of its luminosity. Like the light we have or the sunlight outside also has a luminosity that reveals all the objects in the world, but unfortunately the light outside is not aware that I am able to reveal all these different objects. But consciousness is such that it is self-aware and it is aware of its reflexivity, it is reflexively aware of its luminosity, and that being aware of that luminosity, that very aspect we are calling Shakti and Tripura Sundari. So to recognize her in her corporeal form, then it's just a course of meditation that we are substituting some aspects of the philosophical teachings into this iconic form. We are borrowing that Vimarsha into the red color, for example, and we are bringing Manas, mind, into the bow. So it's all the aspects in the iconography of Tripura Sundari is basically a substitution of what are the integral factors of the absolute when it is considered as endowed with potentials, infinite potentials. This Tripura Sundari is worshipped in a mandala called Sri Yantra or Sri Chakra, that is primarily an yantra of triangles. This is 9 triangles when intersect, making 43 triangles, and surrounded by some 2 layers of petals and the square. That is just a trope, a tool for contemplation, for meditation. Many people, again, it can go into unreflected type worship of, I offer a flower and my wish is fulfilled, and I am not saying that that will somehow help you recognize the Brahman. That may or may not, I don't know about that. But what is applicable for learners of the Vedanta is the interconnectedness of each of these symbols in transforming our externalized modes of consciousness to bring them back to the inner realization, and only then this turns into worship. There are many ways of worshipping Tripura Sundari within my own lineage and in the Shankara's lineage. That is worshipped. She is worshipped as Samaya Acharya. What is Samaya? This Samaya is not time, because if you simply translate the Hindi word Samaya, then it will be like a time. But Samyak Aya means correct knowledge, valid, true knowledge. And this requires a 4-fold, 5-fold, 6-fold, depending how many ways you want to reflect. We call Aikya an integration. What is this Aikya or integration? You have the deity as a separate image, you have the yantra, a geometric form, you have the mantra of the deity, and there you are as a separate subject. In this meditative practice, you reflect upon the oneness. You can start from anywhere. You reflect upon the singularity of the phonemes of the mantra with the image of the deity. Now, what you start is substituting this particular phoneme constitutes the body of the goddess, this particular phoneme constitutes her face, these particular phonemes constitute her weapons and the gestures and the garb. It's establishing a connection between different tropes, bringing metaphors from one system and utilizing them into other, rather than going into all varied forms of external rituals. It is bringing the entirety of the practices into the meditative, contemplative practice. And why this internalization is essential, as only upon reflection that it helps us bringing externalized tropes into pure reflection in the mind and recognition of singularity, oneness, and that recognition of singularity, oneness is what translates eventually into the realization of the Brahman, because the goal is different. Because some might be doing the same practices, worships for a very mundane goals. But in the practice of Shaktism, for a Vedanta practitioner, the goal is very different. A sadhaka is not interested in magic. He is not trying to learn some hypnotic exercises or some magical killings or any violent forms of mantric practices. He is using these systems for a deeper realization, and that is where the Aikya, the recognition of oneness, becomes essential. Then mapping of the yantra with your own body, just another trope. There is this yantra, the triangle, the 8 triangles, the 10 triangles, the another layer of 10 triangles, 14 triangles, like 8 petals, 16 petals, and the square. So you map your own body, you situate these different structures within your body, and you substitute your body to that geometric design to the extent that when you are seated in deep contemplation, your own corporeality dissolves and you start experiencing yourself in the form of the yantra. When you map your own body in the form of the goddess, You get into such deep reflection that you wake up with the realization that you are the goddess. You experience yourself in the form of the divinity. You map your body into the structure, the body of what you are meditating upon. And I know you all have heard of such mappings that comes to life in the life of Ramakrishna, who mapped his own personal corporeal experience with the experience of Mother Kali. That is exactly what Samaya stands for. So in these mappings, you have the mantra to map with the body of the goddess and your own body, and the map of the mantra with the geometric design. So these multiple mappings actually is what is called Shakta meditation. What constitutes the core of the Shakta meditation, as I said, is Samaya. But for most of the Tripura Sundari, because what happened is we got the discrete practices and lost the interwovenness even within the Shakta paradigm because of the charm of all the outside things and people not wanting to take philosophical teachings more seriously. So the very constitution of Samaya is coming from the pantheon of Kubjika. So if you read one of the most prominent texts, the Saundarya Lahari, credited for Shankaracharya, whether the first or the later one, that is not that interesting to me, but the book is very popular and with tens of different commentaries from the classical times. The very verse 41 verse, Navatmanam Manne, this is Sahasamaya Lasya Pare. That is basically when this Shankaracharya lays the foundation for sixfold meditation of the Shambhava wisdoms, all coming from the Kubjika pantheon, and concludes the Samaya practice in the Muladhara Chakra with the invocation of Navatma Bhairava in the form of Samaya. I know I'm speaking some of the little esoteric vocabulary because I was prepared today that I don't want to do rhetorical things anymore. I would rather provide you with some substance, and then I hope that this will lead you to some of you to encourage in reading some of these materials. So where is it going? So the form of Tripura is quite well known, but Kubjika is now mostly reserved among a very few Pandit householders in Nepal. And some scholars like Mark Dieskowski have unearthed very many manuscripts and have brought translation of the text, and many of you can explore from those scholarly works. But going back to the Samayachara, this is coming from this sixfold structure. Now we had the Tripura in the triadic structure, just based in a triangle or triadic structure of I am, now into sixfold structure of six Shambhava wisdoms taught within the pantheon of Kubjika that elevates now the original triadic structure, now goes into the intersecting triangles, the same Pramatri, Pramana, Prameya or subject, object and the means of cognition, reflected twofold in the illumination aspect and reflection aspect, or prakasha and vimarsha, becomes a hexagon, an intersection of two triangles, and this hexagon structure is what constitutes the base for the Samaya reflection. And within the Samaya and Samaya, the integration of Samaya, that Navatma Bhairava, and yet another esoteric vocabulary, with the Bhairavi, that is where we find Samarasya. Rasa means the juice. Rasa is what flows. Rasa is also aesthetic experience. Rasa is savoring. And Sama is mingling, like when they are mixed equally. And this Samarasya is a co-mingling of the father and the mother principles. They are cohabiting when they are visualized. You may have seen all in Tibetan language. They call abyum, we call samarasya, and some of them are depicted in the graphic structures of having erotic sexual union. Others are simply depicted as seated on the lap of the Bhairava, ultimately demonstrating the very principle of reflexivity merging within illumination, pure consciousness reflexively being aware of itself in the most delightful ecstatic state of rapture. And this is where the totality expresses itself into the manifold. And they are not saying this happens once. This is what they mean is this whole world is a rapture. This being now is a rapture. This right now in front of us is the very expression of Navatma Bhairava and Navatmeshwari in the absolute interpenetration. A recognition. It's not cognition. Cognition is one way. Recognition, reflecting back the cognition, that consciousness that self-affirms. This self-affirmation of consciousness is what constitutes this singularity. An active Advaita, an active non-dualism, an active singularity. It is a total awareness of being present in this singular mode of non-duality. So this Samaya structure, as I explained in the pantheon of Kubjika, now still continues within this triadic structure, only duplicated based on the primacy of Shiva or illumination or the primacy of Shakti or reflection, Vimarsa. But now I have left the fivefold structure that I started with, because that originally I said the structure expressing itself in the form of pure consciousness and bliss, that in itself is volition and cognition and action. So that fivefold structure is what we get eventually in the form of Kali. So the pentadic structure, now we get into the pentad, fivefoldness. So originally the triad and the subsumption of triad in the transcendent structure, a fold-fold structure, we can find in Tripura, because Tripura itself is a bivalent terminology, whereas Tripura, that which is situated in all triadic structures, or Tripura, that which transcends the triadic structure. It is cohabiting all triadic forms or transcending the triadic forms. It's simultaneously expressing the cohabitedness of the divine in these expressed forms and the transcendence of the divine of all these expressed manifold. So this transcendence of the triadic structure comes in the Upanishadic discourse primarily in the transcendence of our waking, dreaming, and the deep sleep states, Jagrat, Swapna, and Sushupti, that I am sure you have consulted the Mandukya Upanishad, and Swamiji Sarvapriyananda has also given extensive discourse, and I've learned from that a lot. Now, in this fivefold structure of Kali, we do not just go and transcend this triadic structure. We start thinking, reflecting upon the same reality in a new way of pure consciousness and its blissful modes and volition and cognition and action, a completely new set of reflection. Within that new set of reflection, what we get is the absolute pulsation. This is called Spanda Shakti. What is this Spanda Shakti? This, the very Brahman you call Shiva, that very absolute is constantly pulsating, and as I started, its pulsation is not a directional flowing, it's rather a recognition of its simultaneous presence and transcendence. And in this simultaneous presence and transcendence, what this Shakti does is it allows itself to recognize into the manifold. What Vedanta taught us is to transcend our triadic expression, the threefold states of being, Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti, and go to the Turiya, the fourth pure state of consciousness. Now, what this fivefold structure is teaching us is to now come back to reaffirm your own presence in this fourfold expressions. The fifth is a bhasa we call luminosity, basically reaffirming your own expression in the world. It is coming back home. You go to school, you get knowledge. You realize what this world is all about. And then there is one thing you can do, go to a cave and live there forever. But there is something better you can do. Come back home and make the world a better place the best you can. Tantra is telling you to go back home and make this world a better place the best you can do. Recognize the Shakti within. It is not a recognition of the Shakti without. What is the point when you go and worship? This is the site of the goddess, and I offer some apples and some roses, and I will get some power. You have not worshipped her. The only way you can worship her is when you see this Kali is within me. This Tripura is within me. My very presence, my very being is the presence or the being in the modes of Kali or Tripura. And that is when, whether you are offering flowers or offering fruits or not, you are actually worshipping. Worship here is recognizing. It is like when a king comes to you at your doorstep and you recognize him, you offer him fruits and food and water, or you recognize him, oh, you are the king in disguise. Okay, it's a good thing you offered some fruits or food, whatever, that's a good thing. But as long as you do not recognize him as the king, you have not gotten the game, because there is this worship, the external form of worship is just like throwing some coins to the king who doesn't depend on your coins. But when you oh, you are the king, and then, oh, he got me. So you see, immediately you have recognized the person who is in disguise in front of you. The same way, when you recognize, oh, you are me, then this mother is actually recognized within, and you are empowered. So that is, this Shaktipat can be a little bit scary, particularly for the states, for any dominance, because when you recognize that the power is nowhere but within you, nobody can really scare you. You have no fear even from death. Imagine what you would be like. You are not conditioned by anybody or society or the state, and imagine what you would be like. Would you be really that scary though? What if you start doing something random, unwholesome? That is where Vedanta comes to place you in the right channel, because your Shakti is recognized only for you to recognize singularity of yourself with the world, that you are the beats of your heart are not the separate beats from the beats of the heart of all the sentient beings in the world. And as long as that recognition is not placed properly, then there is no sadhana. There is no greater recognition. So this is why, what is this Shiva then? That's how I started the conversation with a line from Maheshwarananda. He wrote in Prakrit language. He thought mother's language is Prakrit, and he wrote, Taha taha disantanam sati sahasana ekka sanghatto tatha tatha. In this and that way, being visualized, being recognized, all the thousands of potentials, a singular unity of all the expressed potentials. What is that? Niya hiya ujjama rupo, the very expression of the pulsation of your own heart. What is the recognition of all these Shaktis? This is the recognition of your own being, your own presence. This is when I am becomes the recognition of I am Mother Kali. I am Shiva, I am Brahman. This is when this recognition of the finite, mortal, limited being becomes boundless, infinite, absolute. The very experience of Aham, as I started in the beginning, this very experience of Aham becomes now the Aham, the totality that is transformed into pure presence, pure being of Shiva consciousness, or the presence of the Mother Kali. And in this expression, the fivefoldness, we find the creation, the order of creation coming into being, sustenance, dissolution or retrieval, coming back to its own singularity. Upanishad teaches us that yathorna navi srijate grihnate cha tathaksharat sambhavati vishwam. Just like a spider spreads its nest and retrieves back within its own body. There are very few species within spiders, by the way. Not all spiders do that, but some of them are capable of, just like they spread the nest from their own net from their own body, but they reabsorb the net when they have to move on. So this world is an expression of that Akshara, the Brahman, the Absolute, and it reabsorbs within that reabsorbing form of the Absolute in tantric depiction is called Kala Sankarshini. Kali, therefore, is invoked as Kala Sankarshini. She who retrieves back everything starting from Kala, the time. Kala is also Mahakala, Kala Bhairava, because she also consumes him. So she doesn't leave anything behind. Don't worry about you or me, because she is the absolute devouring Bhadrakali. She is Purna, full, and she is Krisha, the hungry one. She is replete and she is empty. So this, her emptiness is the expression of the world. Her perfection, completion is the dissolution of the world and experiencing in the form of singularity. She is constantly playing this twofold nature of self-expression and unfolding and enfolding of externality. And this is the recognition of Mother Shakti in the form of Kali. What we call that is then, after dissolution, Anakhya, the inexpressible state, that is nameless state, and then Bhasa, the luminosity, we call that, where teemingly some externalities start appearing to restart the wheel. And this is the fivefold structure is known in the form of abhasana, manifestation or illumination, rakti, engagement within the externalized forms, vimarsana, reflexively cognizing those manifest forms that are you are engaged with, and then preserving some seeds in the form of the habits or the memory, and then dissolving all other forms into pure consciousness. A constant play of consciousness in the form of manifesting externality, engaging in the externalized forms and cognizing that object, and keeping some within the mind as impression, and then dissolving the rest of the forms. Every day or every instant, consciousness is constantly functioning in this fivefold structure, and that is what in the Krama system we call the fivefold Kali as Srishti Kali, Sthiti Kali, Samhara Kali, Anakhya Kali, and Bhasa Kali. So this fivefold structure of Kali asks us to transcend even the triadic structure and to recognize in the Panchakrama, we call the fivefold succession of recognizing the presence, the being of Kali. And here with Jamarupo, I was that far. So in the form of the pulsation of your own heart, Hoi Sibo Nama, Parama Satchando, that is what is called the Shiva, the absolutely autonomous. What is Shiva? In this depiction, Shiva or the Brahman is nothing but Sati Sahasrana Ekka Sanghata, a singular union, a fusion of all the millions of tropes named Shakti. So there it is not a dichotomy between Shiva and Shakti. It rather, Shiva is only a name of the collective of Shakti. Just like you have two different words, you go to upstate New York to a park, and then you go with your child, and then you start teaching him the trees. This is oak, and this is maple, and this is whatever, all the different trees, and your child asks, but I want to see the forest. And you say, this is the forest. And the child asks, tell me which one is the forest. No, the forest is when you call for all the trees together. So is the name of the forest for the oak and the maple and all other trees? No, the forest is this singular. When you call in singularity, you call it forest, and the trees are individuals. The same way, Shiva is the name of the collective, the totality, and Shakti is the name of the individuals for each and every expression of the tropes. When now in modern scholarship, this is the primacy of the female, this is the primacy of the male Shiva. So what they are not willing to reckon. That's why I feel special coming here, because this is more of a supportive mass that wants to understand the intent, not just to misuse it for some social argumentation. And so now, what is the intent of this whole course of sadhana then? Well, I could bring more names, but I think I should reserve myself to just these three names: the Tripura Sundari practice, the Kubjika practice, and then the Kalika Kulakrama practice, where all of these come to merge again is within what we call the Trika, that is in Para, in the absolute form of the goddess, in the most pristine form. She is luminous, white, radiating, the most simple form of our visualization. She is carrying a book and a rosary. She is like, in all expression, she is pure Mother Saraswati. So this, in the form of Para, when we are coming as a convergence of these distinctive tropes expressed with different names of the goddess, what we discover is we recognize the speech, the vach, because all the expressions is the expressions by means of speech. There is a primacy of words. There is the primacy of speech. There is the primacy of the phonemes even. And within this primacy, what we discover is this pure consciousness expressing itself in the form of speech. I want to say something. The first is, I don't even know what I want to say, but there is this zeal to express, to say something. Have you ever been to the state that you really want to say something, but you don't have the words? That is Para. That is where you have this zeal, pure will expressing. And this very Para, the goddess, expresses in the triadic structure of Pashyanti, in which your speech is divided equally in the externalized and internalized, in the me and the speech, in my ego and the rest of the world. And that is yet another form of the very expression of Vats, the goddess, in the form of every single goddess here, whether you name it Kalika or Kubjika, they each multiply with very many forms in corresponding the state of the speech, whether it is in the Para state or in the Pashyanti state. And then there is the externalized but not fully expressed out, we call Madhyama, and then fully externalized form of speech. If you want to read any text to get a quick catch up with that, Andre Padu has written a book called Vach, V-A-C, Vach, and that book might be helpful for you to read some of the inner or esoteric domains of speech. Now, we have come to at least 4 different forms of the goddess in the form of Para, and then Tripura, and then Kubjika and Kalika. We call them Amnaya, basically the transmissions. If you have ever seen a Shiva Linga, a statue in which there are faces in 4 directions, 4 different faces, we call that Pashupati. And then the upper face is always Nirguna, formless, and the absolute Prakasha Vimarsha only, pure illumination with reflexivity, and the lower states, we call them with these 4-fold expression of the goddesses, that expression or emanation we call Amnaya, or the transmissions. And all the agamas, the tantric texts, there are 92 in totality, the original agamas, are considered the expression from these 5 faces of Lord Shiva, self-recognition in the dialogical form, and the dialogue itself between Shiva and Shakti becomes a recognition. Dialogue is the process of recognition. When we are quarreling, we are not recognizing the other. When we are having a dialogue, we need to recognize the other. But there is a deeper domain of dialogue. That deeper domain is not a recognition of you are a different person. That is as far as modern studies can take us, our sheer difference. But this real dialogue is what they call the samaya or samaya, interpenetration. That I am within you or you are within me, that is what we call understanding. When I express I am thirsty, and when you see in my face maybe some signs of thirst, you have the mirror neurons, they mirror something that you would feel if you yourself were thirsty, and you get the insight of thirst. You feel my thirst for a millionth of a second. You feel what it is like to be thirsty. That is where in altruistic modes of expression, it is not just recognizing that, yeah, I should give you some water, but not feeling within me your thirst, to know what it is like to be thirsty. When someone cries in front of you, yes, this man wants some coins, throwing some coins. If you are a generous person, you can do. But if you have studied Vedanta, you may still give some coins. But you know what? You feel being there in his place. You recognize oneness with that person. And that is where your true Vedanta comes to practice. Otherwise, you have not studied Vedanta. That is the goal of sadhana, not just to say oneness, but to feel this oneness in the world. And that is what the mother sadhana, the sadhana in the Shakta pantheon is all aimed at, that we not just understand, but recognize. I understand you are hungry. No, but I feel your hunger. And there is a big difference in this feeling hunger from a feeling pain of another subject. That is what Shaktism is going to transform you and help you to elevate a simple Vedanta knowledge into a practical Vedanta knowledge, an application, and a mission. That is when Vedanta becomes a mission. That is when it comes to action. That is when your realization goes beyond the book and comes to live within you. And you start feeling like the zeal, like I need to do something about it. And then the first thing happens is, but I don't have the money. But I don't have the power. But I cannot make a difference in this big world. I'm such a powerless person. That is the first level of recognition. And that is when we need to surrender to Mother Kali. And that is when this surrendering is not that I surrender to thou. This surrendering is the simple recognition of you are me and I am you. That is the best of the surrender. Why is that a surrender? I mean, when I'm saying I am you, how could that be a surrender? I'm acknowledging my own divinity. I should rather just become a slave. and I recognize myself at service at the feet of the mother. Should not that be a better form of recognition? I say no. Why? You want to preserve your separatedness. It is like you go to this king, let's say for the sake of the metaphor, and then you want to keep in your wallet a $1 just because that's your money, and then you still want to praise him. But what if you need some money to take train back home, therefore you are keeping it. That same way you are driven with the mode of self-conservation to dissolve this self-identity at the feet of the mother, to erase my separatedness from the presence of the mother, to whether I will wake up with my experience of aham again or not, to have no worry about it, to have no sense of fear, to dissolve into that absolute. It is like the first time, if you have never gone to swimming, you have no training to swim, it is like first time. There is always the first time, It is like first time jumping into the ocean. And your willingness to be drowned into this singularity, it is scary. Abhaye Gaudapada writes that it is fearsome. Most people are scared to jump into this singularity because what it does is they are scared of their self-conservation. You know what this fear is like? This multi-millionaire brother is inviting you. Brother, you have lived in America for so long. You worked hard but didn't save a penny. Come, I was fortunate and I made $100 million. And let's merge our wealth and then all is yours and all is mine equally. But then you want to hide your $100 in a bank. What if, what if, just in case you need it. This unwillingness to dissolve is what keeps us separated. This willingness to dissolve does not stop us from functioning in the world. What if we stop functioning in the world? That becoming rich is always more powerful than becoming poor. It is not an erasure of being. It is a negation of the limitedness and opening to the infinite. And if you are infinitely rich, you can do a lot more. If you allow yourself to have the Kali to flow in your heart, you can experience the world to be reshaped within the design, the expression of Lord Shiva. You get that power and you have no limitation in its expression. You have no personal will, personal zeal, personal goal, personal satisfaction. Your satisfaction is an expression of seeing the face of the satisfied people. You see, service comes automatically with this recognition. Many people say, what is the point of this realization? That is only self-serving, because they have not studied Vedanta. They have not recognized the presence of the mother in the recognition of Vedanta. They have left the mother aside and only reflected in this luminosity, not in reflection. What does this recognition do? Is it allows you to recognize her expression in the multiple forms, in the absolute magnitude, and not as something bereft of you, but rather a mirroring of you. You become infinite. You are one singular being within your skin now, and just by opening up, you experience yourself in every heart, the pulsation of you. You become immortal, because death was finite as long as we were finite within this body. And now recognition of this gives us our presence, our continuity. through the continuity of the world, not even species, not even living beings, because the cosmos is constantly unfolding and unfolding. Life is endless because it is the intrinsic nature of being. Prak Sambit Prane Parinata. There was one master long ago named Bhatta Kallata, and we know from his work that first of all consciousness unfolds, expresses itself in the form of prana, this life energy, life force. So pure consciousness itself is intrinsically woven with life. Life is everywhere. Life is in what we call insentient inertia of a rock. Life is all permeating. First of all, consciousness is absolutely all permeating, and in all the expressed mode, life is all permeating, and only within the finite limited objects it becomes expressed. Otherwise, it is dormant. So this is Swabhava, your intrinsic nature. This expression itself, it becomes your intrinsic nature, and let's meditate upon this expression of the intrinsic nature in the manifold of Shakti. And I don't know how much time I took. I would like to now lead us to have some conversation, and I'm deeply indebted to you and the Vedanta Society for giving me this opportunity to express the glory of the Mother, to sing her presence. Thank you so much.
Please put your hand up if you have a question, and the mic will be brought to
you. Thank you, Professor. It was a very interesting talk. And so my understanding in the Advaita Vedanta is the basic idea that consciousness is all that there is, but the difference appears through appearance, which is Maya. And I didn't hear you talk about Maya at all in your talk, and I just wondered, does Maya have any role to play in the Shaktism and the practice you're describing? Does that idea exist anywhere in it? And if so, could you explain it? And also, a short follow-up question. You also, in your talk, described this idea of a Brahman somewhat like a spider, the universe issuing forth from Brahman, but then it's still being Brahman as a spider's web. It comes from the spider's body coming back. And my understanding is that that's Vishishadvaita. That's from what I've learned. So you're talking about Vishishadvaita there, not Advaita Vedanta. Could you explain those, please? Thank you very much.
Thank you. From what I have explained, most of my commentary underlies the Trika philosophy, whether I express that way or not. Basically, for the last one, whether it is Vishishtadvaita, maybe in some regards, because Vishishtadvaita the very name comes with the Ramanuja and a Vaishnavite training, but if you compare Abhinavagupta's teachings with Ramanuja's, actually we find a tremendous commonality there. So first of all, within that, I would like to have that rest at that point. So just because we hear it's not going to pure Kevala Advaita, it's not complete, that comes maybe from our sluggish stubbornness, worried about the terminology or worried about the theological applications that it comes with, and some historical conditioning of the South and the North and all those factors. For us, they mean nothing. So we are rethinking these things for the 21st century America and the globe in a completely new form. And those sectarian divides in the classical time, some 1200 years ago, do not mean anything to us. But yes, what are those nitty-gritty details? We can have a personal conversation, because broadly I accept that objection, that what if it takes us to some Vishishta-Dvaita type, and that's okay with me. But what is the role of Maya? That is the first question. And I think that this issue of Maya has diminished the glory of Advaita Vedanta rather than bringing it to its height, to its pinnacle. Because everything about the world is just Maya. So meaning it's infinitesimal, tuchya, it's you can ignore, it's illusion, and then these different modes of expression like your own presence, Maya, our conversation, also Maya, it's meaningless. And ultimately, we make even the teachings of the Vedanta redundant because it also is Maya. Our whole discourse is also redundant because it's also Maya. So this Maya type understanding has led us to an extreme form of illusionism. And I'm not trying to reinvent anything, but I'm trying to only reread, or rather more faithfully read the Upanishads themselves and then commentarial traditions. So what is Maya? The word Maya comes from ma, that verbal root is mang, mane, and that ma means to mana, to measure, that from which we get the words like matrika, and in English we have the words like meter, metrification. It's measuring. So if we go to the actual verbal root and its meanings, even the whole Indo-Aryan terminology, we do not find any connection with Maya as illusion. We find it as metrification, matrika, what matrices. They are translated, all the scholars today translate matrika as matrices. Matrix, it's a form of measuring. What does Maya do? Mati, meaning measures, delimits. And that is where we can say it is illusion. But what it does, mati, pure consciousness is boundless. And when it is boundless, it is useless. Please bear with me. So what happens when it is under the subject of Maya, the measuring force, the Shakti, then it gives me the consciousness of Dhyana. Like what does that do? It delimits that consciousness. It removes all the other factors and gets a finite shape, gets a finite name. I have a concept. Dhyana. I have a concept. Timothy, I have a concept, husband, wife, book, school. All the concepts are limitations. Pure Brahman is limitless. But because there is no conceptualization in the absolute pure Brahman, there is no application of that knowledge either. Being in the world requires delimitation. But just because it is delimited, just because it is brought to finitude, doesn't mean that it has to be negated, wiped clean. What it needs to be, though, is it needs to be recognized. So this recognition is like in the form of, we have the names for everything, brother and sister and mother and grandmother and all these different relations, or each of them having their own names. They're all delimitations. And they all continue as a human. They all continue as the Brahman, the same singularity. In Vidyaranya's work, in Vedanta Panchadashi, that was my first book. My Guruji said, I will not teach you anything before I teach you Panchadashi. It was a long book and took a year or two. I recommend everybody to read that. Vedanta Panchadashi, Vidyaranya Swami extensively explains like how recognizing the book or the school or all, like Ghatakasa, Mathakasa, the same sky is conditioned in the form of a room, in the form of a school, in the form of a mansion, and all that cutting of the empty space by giving some walls. That's what Maya does. It delimits. But delimitation, just because it is delimited, we should not fail to recognize the essence. That's all Vedanta is. I'm talking. What I mean is, when somebody cannot see the empty space as the sky, when I say, okay, there's this sky, and then I'm moving my fingers here, and a child is looking, but the sky is outside. There is no sky inside. And that is, he has not understood the meaning of the sky as the space. He's used to recognize the sky as the blue, that sphere up like a wall. And that comes from misunderstanding. But just because the sky is divided into the form of little vase, like empty space within or the room, the sky is not polluted, the sky is not conditioned as such. The same way, the Brahman, the Shiva, the Absolute, there is no deformation in these modifications, in all these different conceptualizations. The non-duality is never challenged. Therefore, in this recognition that manifold can coexist singularity, I can be in the room and then accept this space as the sky. So this is all that is there. But I need to erase all these ideas to recognize oneness. And then you should go just breaking down all the walls that divide the sky, because that is the only way I can see the sky. No, we do not need to break down all the walls. We just need to recognize that whether surrounded by the walls or not, the sky is just the sky. So that is why the Shakta world does not demand us to reject the manifold. Being in the manifold, we are already in the Brahman. There is never negation of the Absolute. Thank you. Yes. And I had seen a hand also there. Maybe either way, doesn't matter. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm a research assistant at the Upstate Psychiatric Department at Columbia, and they're doing psychedelic research for mental health disorders. And one psychedelic that's currently being investigated is 5-MeO-DMT. And one way that people describe the experience of that is what I heard you talking about, with this constant unfolding and infolding, so that they come into direct contact with the experience of the world constantly unfolding and infolding within itself, and that both of these happen at the same time. And so my question kind of was twofold. One is, how can psychedelic experience, or can psychedelic experience help with sadhana? And how can sadhana or tantra help with psychedelic therapy?
Thank you so much. Since I am not an expert on the psychedelics, I'm speaking in the area that I know very little about. But this is my understanding. We have used the conduit of our cognition by the habits in a particular way. We have the stimulants out to see, to touch, to smell, and they give a particular stimulation to us, and that is what we call cognition. It is not necessary that consciousness has to be like that. There are some species that lack these 5 types of conduits, and there are other species that have different type of conduits that we lack, or we do not have the expressed conduits for tapping, like time, for example, or like the birds have the directions, for example, or we may have, but what I mean is there are other conduits for tapping into knowledge. What these psychedelics are doing is they are jamming the accustomed modes of the conduit. Consciousness can have millions of different conduits to unfold. This biology is a product of 3 billion years of our history of being in this ecosystem. If we were in a completely different ecosystem in Mars or whatever, our conduits for channeling that same consciousness would have been potentially very different based on the ecosystem. And therefore, how that knowledge, because these conduits, Maya, these conduits are only limiting pure consciousness. They are not constructing or creating consciousness. They are channeling consciousness, like the canals cutting in a river. They are not making water, they are channeling water. And so this DMT is blocking or blurring the regular modes, the regular conduits, and we are exposed to a different type of experience, which is yet another mode of experience. But then that must be very helpful. But that is where I am very suspicious. Why? Is because I myself have many friends who have done DMT, mostly with LSD or various mushrooms, various forms of drug use. Based on that observation and based on my own philosophical reflection, what I find is a yogic opening of the channels is you having your key on hand and you learning how to unlock these conduits to freely enter into deeper domains. You subjecting yourself to drug is you giving your body to others, external factors, to channel whatever potential experiences are there as possible. And so this subletting our personal responsibility to others eventually controls our freedom rather than opening up our freedom. So most subjects who have, maybe one time they got into spirituality, that's a different story. But for those subjects who make a habit of going into those states by means of DMT in particular, they are now conditioned to the use of DMT and far removed from their own personal freedom to experience that. You have to forgive me. As a young person, I haven't gone to try big things, but with ganja and things, okay? So, because in Nepal, we have these yogis, these hermits from Gorakhnath tradition. I had also one Gorakhpanthi Guruji, and he was very eminent, great yogi. Guruji, I should also do. Then he said, you are just stupid to try that. But, many of the yogis there in his company were doing it, and I thought there is no harm. And then Guruji, because we are doing it in total openness, that's we shouldn't make hypocrisy as a precondition for having a spiritual conversation. so then I'm just, Guruji, I just need to try. Okay, then Guruji said, try these things. So one thing I experienced was the layers of visualization that I was capable of doing on my own, and the particular experiences that were almost like everyday thing for me became very difficult. It would take like a month for me to get there each time. And like 5, 6, then I don't need to try more. I realized that this is an easy way, shortcut to have something that resembles those experiences, but they somehow suspend our own energy or strength to go spontaneously to be in those states. So anyway, my personal observation among the people who have used, or my own analysis, is that they actually might be detrimental for a long-term realization, but a conduit for subjects to see what it can be for a short term. Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful talk. My question is related to your description of Samaya.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can clarify that a little bit. You said the Divine Mother is Samaya, but you said Samaya is not necessarily time
Mm-hmm.
as delimitation within the world. So could you describe that a little bit? How the Divine Mother is time and beyond time?
Yeah, thank you. So, Samaya Chara So when in the particular thing I'm talking as a samaya, is this whole samaya is an internal recognition or reorientation of externalized rituals in mapping into your own pure consciousness. We are using the word samaya for time, but again, going back to etymology, the word samaya comes from sam, the prefix, and aya, the verb. Aya means to go. Eti means goes, moves. But in Sanskrit, the root aya also refers to know, to realize. So it is not just that what moves perfectly. It is time that has the absolute movement. Everything can be somewhat frozen, but not time. Time has its own arrow, its own flow. So that's why samaya is the absolute flow. But in here, we are using samaya as the absolute realization, not as absolute time. But then, in going more technically, in this particular case, we are calling a deity herself in the form of Bhairava as Samaya, and the goddess Tripura Sundari as Samaya, and then their union, to recognize their union, oneness, singularity as the conduct of Samaya or Samayachara. And that is where the meditation begins. And I will hopefully publish my paper on Samayachara within 3 months or so. And if anybody interested, my students here will be willing to make it available for everybody. Because I found that there is very little work done in these meditative aspects of Tantra. There is a tremendous interest in Tantra in the West. But why is that interest? Because, they took sex or, So they are not really interested in these deeper philosophical and meditative aspects. Some of them are, but not all of them. And I think our obligation lies in bringing those forgotten chapters or more meaningful kind of conversations to a broader and global conversation that I will do, I'll have. But what happens in this samaya itself is a identity, what we call aikya, oneness. And then that is the absolute principle here, besides samaya, is also called sadhakya, meaning the absolute harmony. Absolute harmony is the absolute harmony of prakasha vimarsha, which means the illuminating mode of consciousness with its reflexivity, with its self-affirmation. My awareness affirming itself, affirming its being, affirming its presence. Me totally being aware of my awareness. And this is what Samayachara, the ultimate, and that is what Vedanta. Therefore, my goal was to show you why, by hearing the word of Tantra, there is nothing to be scared of, and also nothing to be excited, because many people are excited for all the wrong reasons, and that is not the kind of Tantra that I'm trying to bring to the globe, and particularly not to this temple. In the name of Tantra, you can find every single crazy idea. And just because my Guruji, Vishuddhananda Kaptar Baba, very well known in Nepal, if you Google, you can find, he used to say, this is a job of finding food in dirt like for a pig. So what you have accepted as a challenge is a really big daunting challenge, because there is a lot of garbage, but there is also gems hidden there. So this is a filtering that we need to be willing to do, because when people start some of these practices and they get excited, and then not all the books, each tantra has a separate goal set up actually, And therefore each agama could be complete on its own, and therefore we need to be able to filter. That is where the Samayacharya type, purely philosophical reflection comes to conversation, and this is the right audience for that, because people who are only interested in magic and things, they are not going to be interested in this type of reflective or visualization practices. That is what Samayacharya brings. Thank you so much. Any last question? Yeah, okay, right there. I think if you could get the mic.
Thank you so much for the talk. Very enlightening. My question is, just right now that you said that there are different aspects of Tantra that is not exciting, or it is exciting, but it's not exciting. So I was just wondering that in the current context of healing and mental health, what do you think about the current research methodologies, and also using Tantra for healing in the West? And of course in the East it's been used in different ways, but in the West specifically, and what are the research methodologies that scientists or researchers should focus on or they can use?
One of the things I observed teaching in San Diego State for a long time is many of my students were returned vets, and some of them had lost limbs, and if not, many of them had trauma because of being in Iraq war or some of these horrendous situations, exposed to real life bombing and any minute of death situation. Since I'm not a psychiatrist and I'm not allowed to tell them anything about it, but as a teacher I could observe and see and contemplate deeply about would any of these teachings help, and that led me to the work on visualization practices. I never instructed any of these things. University settings are not made for that. But what I realized is the whole objective of the visualization practice is to empower you to create your own mental reality. Our psychological problems are the problems of us creating a dark space within ourselves. If I'm exposed to a traumatizing situation of witnessing my very best buddy being bombed and his body being shattered, I keep replaying that scene again and again and again, building trauma. That replaying I call visualization. That is not intentional. That is almost spontaneous. And that turns into habit, and that gives us nightmares. And so what Tantra is doing is you program these visualizations about thinking of who you are, of like this, think of first we start creating, let's say, a triangle or pyramid. And then we say rotate these, animate these, like you have a deity image, two-dimensional, and then animate the deity image, like make her look real. And engage in that conversation. What we are doing is we are empowering the subject to have tremendous freedom in creating her own mental world. And so the subject now is able to counter those traumatizing mental experiences to substitute them with pleasant modes of mental experiences. Personally speaking, I had a sort of inexplicable fear from darkness. As I was growing up, we didn't have electricity or anything in remote village of Nepal, and there are all the family histories and all the garbage I don't want to bring. But I would be mortified to be out in the night. No, that's a real fear. After initiation at the age of 16 and persuasion by my teachers at the age of 18, I spent good amount of time in the nighttime cremation ground meditation. I lost fear. I realized meaninglessness of fear. And I cannot say that will be applicable in everybody's case. I just, with all transparency, just like in previous example, I'm bringing myself as an example. I could feel absolutely fearless. In the presence of Kali, in the presence of Bhairava, I had nothing to be scared of. So I believe that our traumatizing experiences can be subsumed and eventually erased by supplanting and substituting them with more productive, more positive experiences for which we need to train our subjects for visualization, their ability to create a mental scenario that is a positive. That's all I can say. Thank you so much. I think we have maybe spent our mother time, Kali. So I would just like to make a final prayer. Om Vishwam Darpana Drishyamana Nagari Tulyam Nijantargatam Pashyannatmani Maya Bahiribodh Bhutam Yatha Nidraya Ya Sakshat Kurute Prabodha Samaye Swatmanamevadvayam Tasmai Sri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Sri Dakshina Murtaye Tasmai Sri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Sri Dakshina Murtaye.